Grain, a former economic advisor to the President of the European Commission. He joins us from London. We have Volker Stanzel, a German diplomat and former German ambassador to China and Japan. He joins us from Berlin. And we have Yannis Koutsomitis, a Greek journalist, joining us from Athens. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Let's start in Berlin. Ambassador Stanzel, as we just heard from our reporter, there was a meeting just before the weekend, but still no deal. What, in your view, is the main issue that are dividing the two sides and preventing them from coming to some kind of agreement?
Well, you see, the new Greek government, of course, is on the path of brinkmanship. It wants to get the best deal that's possible. That is completely legitimate and understandable. But, of course, those who pay, those who are asked to give new loans to Greece, want to be sure that the rules are being kept, that the deal that has been made in the past in order to come to a bailout are really followed. And the Greek government so far has not made proposals that have seemed acceptable to the European partners. So in my view, I think the discussion will continue up to the last moment. The last moment is 12th of May, when the Greeks will have to pay $750 million.
Philip, do you agree with that Greece is engaging in brinkmanship here, and also the fact that it has been not very cooperative with its European partners in paying back these loans? You've accused Germany, for instance, of bullying Greece. Tell us more about that.
Well, Germany clearly has been bullying Greece since the start of this crisis. Back in 2010, it was clear that Greece's debts need to be restructured, but in order to avoid losses for French and German banks, instead we engaged in this pretense that actually it was merely going through temporary funding difficulties. And for the past 5 years, Greece has struggled with the burden of an unpayable debt. And Greece is right to be wary of Eurozone governments. They promised the Greek government that they would give it debt relief once it achieved a primary surplus, which it has done. And now they've set a new set of conditions, which are reforms, a list of reforms which to me seem mostly designed to force Syriza to break its election promises and therefore undermine its domestic popularity, rather than being anything that is really necessary for unlocking the next tranche of money, which, it should be said, merely is going to be recycled back to the IMF and the ECB, and therefore provide hardly any benefit at all to Greece itself.
Yannis, Greece has fulfilled part of the deal, as Philippe just pointed out. It has got to a primary surplus, which was called for in the initial agreement. What are the options for Athens right now? I mean, are we seriously looking at a default and possible departure from the Eurozone?
Well, the Syriza government and their partners, independent Greeks, don't have a mandate from their election to take Greece out of the Eurozone. The electorate mandate was to negotiate really hard with the creditors and get the best deal available. There were some polls yesterday published in the newspapers which showed that the people are ready to have a good positive response for a compromise for the government. And today, Prime Minister Mr. Tsipras made a reshuffle of the negotiating team and sort of put Mr. Varoufakis, the finance minister, on the sideline, and has put the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Tsakalotos, as a coordinator of negotiations. Right now, Greek government has a political problem. It has to show to the people that it is respecting their pre-election pledges, but on the other hand, it does not have a mandate to take Greece out of the Eurozone. Greeks, by more than 80%, support the country's membership in the Eurozone. So there is a very delicate balance right now for Mr. Tsipras to get the best deal possible from the negotiations and still come with save his face to the Greek electorate.
Ambassador Stanzel, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think Yannis has really put his finger on the spot. The problem that the Greek government is facing is that the people want to stay inside the euro, but the way the Greek government is pursuing the negotiations might lead to a Grexit indeed. And that is not something that anyone wants, neither the government nor the European partners. Now, to leave emotions aside, I think if we look at what the Greek governments, even before Syriza, have done, is to really try very hard to alleviate the suffering that is a fact in Greece. But have they done enough in terms of reforms? I think we need to compare to what the Irish have done, what the Portuguese have done, what the Spanish have done. They have implemented reforms of the same kind that now European or Euro governments are asking from the Greeks. And they have been fairly successful with that. So I think, even though it's extremely hard and understandably hard for the Greek government to implement some sort of reforms, I think there's no other way.
Yeah, go ahead, Philippe.
That's actually disingenuous. I mean, you're conflating two issues, which is one, the level of debt, and two, the amount of reform. You know, the reason why Ireland is doing well now is not because it's reformed a lot. Actually, it already had one of the most flexible and dynamic economies in Europe before the crisis. It's because it happens to have a more bearable level of debt, and therefore markets are willing to fund it. And it happens to have booming export markets in the US and the UK. Those are not things which Greece disposes of. More importantly, you know, we've had 5 years of an EU-IMF program for Greece, and never has there been this emphasis on reforms. On the contrary, the emphasis has been on just keep up the pretense that you're solvent, keep meeting the austerity targets, and we'll provide you with more money. Now, suddenly the goalposts get shifted when Syriza gets elected, which is we need reforms now, and we need a whole list of things. And the only reason this is being insisted on, as I said, is in order to try and undermine Syriza politically. So you can quite understand why Syriza doesn't take in good faith all the demands of its Eurozone governments. Now, even more importantly, there is nothing logical or legal about the idea that debt restructuring or default equals Euro exit. In fact, the EU treaty makes no provision for countries to leave the euro, and there is no reason why Greece's debts could not be written down, as indeed they already were, the private ones in 2012, while remaining within the euro. If the decision to force Greece out of the euro is made, it will be a political choice by Eurozone governments, and indeed an illegal one.
Regarding what Philip said, I agree with him that focus has been set mainly on austerity and fiscal restructuring in the recent years. Right now, there has to be some reforms. There could be a compromise in which way Syriza may agree to reform the tax system, which is really, really bad shape, and also reform how to collect taxes and how to restructure the state, because also the state is in very bad shape. But right now, Greece has a pension system which is in the verge of collapsing, and also it's still the labor market, it's still not flexible enough to have new investors come in and make new jobs. So right now, I think Syriza might need to compromise on a couple of issues, which could be consolidate or maybe reform the pension system, and especially some very strange cases in the pension system, and also have a more flexible system for privatizations and for the labor market. On the other hand, it's common ground here that no more fiscal adjustment can pass the Greek parliament. It has been absolutely very hard for the people to sustain all this suffering of cuts. But on the other hand, I think the creditors are ready to agree to lower levels of primary surpluses for the next few years. The problem is, in the next years, Greece's debt is more or less the IMF loans and the Greek bonds that are being held by the ECB and the other central banks of Europe. So there has to be some sort of arrangement with the IMF and the ECB via ESM or some other mechanism to take some load off in the next few years. because Greece needs some fiscal space in this year and the next 3 or 4 years in order for the economy to grow again and to revive and get new jobs.
I apologize. I fully agree with Yanis, and I wanted to make the point that I agree with Philip when he says that there's no reason to force, no basis to force Greece out of the Eurozone. If Greece leaves the Eurozone, it's its very own decision. A default without leaving the Eurozone is absolutely possible, even though it will be very painful. I fail, however, to detect the logic in what Philip has said before, that there is a sort of common denominator by other Eurozone governments to ask Greece things it cannot deliver. The Eurozone governments have paid a lot of money so far. They are all aware that Brexit or even a default inside the Eurozone would be catastrophic. Catastrophic, first of all, for the Greeks themselves. Secondly, for the reputation of the euro. And lastly, for the European Union as a whole. So there's no interest at all in asking things of the Greeks they cannot deliver. To the contrary. And I think what happened before the last weekend, the discussions taking place among the ministers of finance of the Eurozone are a case in point. All have, I think, come a long way in trying to accommodate Greece's needs.